you still under oath, Mr. Lin?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes,
Good
Mr.
pieces. Mr. Lin, can we go to page 23 again?
23. Yes.
If we just look at page 23 and let us just deal with now at 80 meters away. If the source of the sound was in the toilet and the listener was standing on the balcony,
Yes.
the sound would be audible and intelligible.
Yes.
Now, with intelligible, you do not exclude the capability to distinguish between male and female voices.
I never say that can one distinguish, one can just say one can intelligent, can we understand the sound, or can we actually perceive the sound? That's how I defined it.
But in what we have on your table, at 80 meters, the word intelligible there includes the capability to distinguish between a male and a female voice.
That's not what I said, my lady.
What do you by intelligible? You're saying what?
I'm going back to my definition. Describes the degree of sound can be understood. Not it is a process that involves human interpretation.
Okay, so in this table of yours, there's nothing about the ability to differentiate between a male and a female voice.
No.
In fact,
No.
apart from paragraph 5.6 and 5.7, there's nothing about the ability to differentiate.
That is correct, my lady.
Now, then, if I okay, so you haven't dealt with that ability to differentiate. But even if at page at paragraph 16 you have a heading, can one reliably differentiate between a male and a female scream? That question remained answered in general tones in paragraph 5.6 and 5.7.
That is correct, my lady.
That's all.
Yes.
So just to continue then, if at page 23 we're dealing with the table, if the source of the sound was in the toilet and the listener was in the bedroom, at the high range would have been audible and intelligible.
That's correct, my lady.
And the rest we've done. So I don't want to go through the whole table, but that is how one interprets this table.
That is correct.
If the source was the bathroom, and that's the source of the sound, the source of the sound was the bathroom, and the listener was on the balcony at 80 meters away, audible, the sound would have been audible and intelligible.
That is correct. And however, I need to bring to attention of the court that this is based on the ambient noise level, and there's another uncertainty at the listener side.
Yeah, indeed. No, that we'll go to. There's lots of uncertainties. Yes. About. We use an average for the source, the sound of the source. We use an average.
Yes.
We use an average for what the window would. The attenuation of what that was caused by the window, by the door. We use averages for everything.
That's correct.
Because you correctly said it's impossible for you to 100% replicate what happened that night, even the source,
that is
the sound source, and also the ambient level at the houses, at the listener's environment. That's also a average between 20 to 45.
That is correct. However, I need to point out that this is the exercise of this model here still within certain scientific basis. We are talking about a range that's possible, not a range that's impossible. So we're talking about a possible scenario on a scientific from a scientific perspective.
But it's possible. You're not excluding the fact that somebody at 177 meters in the bathroom, in the bedroom, would have heard a sound, would have heard the noise and made intelligible findings about it, because that's what the witness testified. You're not saying the witnesses are lying.
I'm not saying they're lying at all. I'm saying they could hear, but I'm not saying what they heard was correct or incorrect.
And so a credibility finding, that is in the domain of the court. You will not say that they're lying, they couldn't have heard that.
Not at all.
Okay. Then, I just want to finalize our very interesting discussion about the SANS 103.
Yes.
The fact that you have to allow a variation, is the basis of that because the human ear would distinguish a sound with a tonal character more easily.
That is correct, yes.
Yes. And that is why one would have to allow a correction. I'm not saying...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, one should never ask too many questions, but may I just ask you this question? Any sound with a tonal character to the human ear is more noticeable.
Sorry, can you...
A sound with a tonal character to the human ear is more noticeable.
There is a norm, that's correct, yes.
Thank you. Maleda, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nellis. Mr. Wu.
Thank you, my lady. Mr. Lin, you offered in cross-examination to show to the court a sound level when there was reference to 22 dBA and even taking it up to 32 dBA. That's when you made the offer. Do you have the instrument here?
Yes, I do.
If I may ask everyone just to be quiet for a moment, and then you tell us what the instrument measures now, the dB. Okay.
It's between 40 and 41, my lady.
14 and?
40, 40 and 41.
So we know that's lower than that.
Yes.
Yes. Now, when you were asked about the newly erected houses, may I ask you this? You were shown the photographs
Yes.
as it then was at the time of 14 February 2013.
That is correct.
And the only reason you were asked to go to the scene is to orientate yourself.
That is correct.
Yeah. Did the new houses play a role in your model?
Not in my calculation. If we take into the house in the calculation, the attenuation will be higher. The noise level will be lower.
Yes. The new houses.
Then, yeah, will provide further obstruction to the sound transmission.
Thank you, my lady. I have no further examination.
Thank you. Mr. Lin, thank you very much for your assistance. You may be excused.
Thank you.
Well, my next witness has just walked into court. May I just it's only a 3-minute adjournment, just to get the document from him.
We have a 3 minutes break.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
Mr.
for the indulgence, my lady. The next witness is Mr. Van Zyl, and we also ask that the order be confirmed, meaning he does not want to be televised. He has, however, put a new tie on in case there's television, but he does not want to be televised.
The image of this witness is not to be televised or produced in any form. Thank you. The witness may be sworn in.
Sir, please state your full names for the record.
Petrus Johannes Daniel van Zyl.
Do you have any objection in taking the prescribed oath?
I have no objection.
Do you consider the prescribed oath to be binding on the conscience?
I do.
So do you swear that the evidence about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If so, raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Witness is sworn in, my lady.
Thank you very much. Mr. Van Zyl, you may take a seat if you so wish.
Thank you, my lady.
Thank you, my lady. Mr. Van Zyl, I want you, in your own words, to tell the court about your relationship with Mr. Pistorius and how it came about.
I am Mr. Pistorius' manager, or sometimes also referred to as agent. The actual term for my role, as per the sports governing body, the IAAF, is an athlete representative. I met Mr. Pistorius for the first time in 2004, my lady, just after the Paralympic Games in Athens with his father. And then we had a formal relationship business-wise from 2006 onwards.
What did that business relationship entail?
Basically constituted of three elements. First and foremost was to secure competitions and races for the client, in this case Mr. Pistorius. Secondly, to also then negotiate and acquire sponsorship and endorsement and brand ambassador agreements for him as a client. And then thirdly, also to manage and ensure that all the financial affairs of Mr. Pistorius is in place.
And what would your contact be with him at the time when you acting as his representative or as his manager?
We pretty much basically had daily contact where we had to discuss upcoming events, schedules, sponsorship commitments that he had to fulfill.
In consultation, Mr. Van Zyl, I specifically ask you about Mr. Pistorius' vigilance. Can you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell the court what you told me about that?
Through all the interaction I had with Mr. Pistorius over the years, it was very evident that, and for me the best way to describe it is basically a heightened sense of awareness. So if I can enlighten the court with specific instances, we would travel to the airport and Mr. Pistorius would be driving quite fast, coming to pick me up at home, and always offered that I can leave my car at home and we just drive with his car, and he would drive quite fast to the airport. I would then inquire from Mr. Pistorius, there's no rush, we've got enough time to make it to the airport. And he would then refer back to me stating that, remember what happened to you in 2007 when I, after another trip that we did, was hijacked at gunpoint and had a very traumatic experience, and he wanted to ensure that we are safe and not being followed.
You also told me about his parking, his approach to parking in the parking areas.
Yes, whenever we had to park in specific, can we call it parking bays at the airport, or for instance at an event that we had to go to, he always ensured that he parked in an open space, easy access, even an enlightened space where there was enough light if it was at night, so that he could always feel safe and secure.
He also told me about an incident in New York.
Yes, we were in New York in 2011 at the IAAF Diamond League, and we were walking down the street just in New York and heard a loud noise, a bang, which I just basically reacted and inquisitively trying to find out what it was, or looked around to see where the noise came from, whereas in Mr. Pistorius' case, grabbed me by the arm, which was very unusual for me, and then suddenly just released again, and we just kept on walking. But it was just strange for me that he would react in such a way that he would grab me when something like this happened.
When you were abroad and he was in his hotel room, how would he, according to you, secure his safety?
We had a few occasions where sometimes late at night I would receive the schedule for the next day's events, whether it be for a photo shoot or a sponsor's commitment or something similar. I then went to Mr. Pistorius' room to give him the necessary information, and by knocking on the door, he always asked first who is at the door, and then secondly, when he opened the door was not only just locked but always had the latch on, which was also for me interesting, being in a safe environment, that he always had the latch on the door apart from just normal lock on the door.
You also informed me about, as an example, when you sat down at his dining room table to look at contracts.
Yes, we had often spent time at Mr. Pistorius' residence to discuss either contractual obligations or also looking at the competition schedule for the season. And whenever we were sitting around the dining table, and it sometimes even was a bit annoying for me that I could never keep him focused on it, as he was always looking around, asking his housekeeper if the front door is locked, asking where the dogs are. So always fidgety, if I can describe it in such a way.
And in going to restaurants, coffee houses and so on?
Yeah, Mr. Pistorius always ensured that he took a seat at a table where he had a clear access and view to the entrance and exit of a restaurant.
There was an incident on the aeroplane with his, when he removed his prosthetic legs.
On one of the many trips that we traveled on, Mr. Pistorius had severe blisters on his stumps from training, and he usually kept his prosthetics legs on even when we were on the plane flying abroad. He never took it off. He was very conscious about that. But because of the blisters, he suffered quite a lot of pain, and he decided that he would take his legs off in that specific instance. He covered it with a blanket, and as he fell asleep later during the night, during the flight, one of the legs fell over and was lying in the aisle. And the air hostess, being kind enough, just doing her normal work that's required from her, bent down to pick up the leg. But at that stage, Mr. Pistorius realized that someone was there by his legs. And the startled reaction and how he jumped up and took the leg away and then put it back under the blanket, so as no one, it was a case for me that he didn't want anyone to see that he had prosthetic legs.
I also ask you about possible aggression inside of Mr. Pistorius. Now, how long in total time did you spend with him?
We have spent, Milady, many years together traveling abroad, and basically the time period that we spent together was in the season, or what we call the athletic season in the northern hemisphere, the northern summer, from the end of May basically until the end of August. So we would then spend a lot of time together either at our training base in Italy, or then going to different competitions where we had to travel to, or either then with sponsorship commitments or public appearance engagements that Mr. Pistorius had to fulfill.
And did he display any aggression in all the time?
In my personal presence, I can only recall two specific incidents where Mr. Pistorius lost his temper. I would not determine it as aggression. I myself lost my temper in those specific occasions, and actually on more occasions I actually sometimes even lost my temper more than what he did for the kind of, I would almost call it abusive questioning from either media or other people that he suffered.
And which are those two occasions?
The one specific occasion, my lady, was when we landed in Barcelona, where Mr. Pistorius was scheduled to compete in a competition. It was in 2009, and it was long after the court case against the Court of Arbitration for Sport and the IAAF was completed, and all the facts regarding whether Mr. Pistorius gained an advantage or not by competing against able-bodied athletes was determined, and all the facts was well documented. And we arrived, and as we came through Arrival Hall, a camera crew stuck a camera in Mr. Pistorius' face and calling him a cheat, that he wants to compete against able-bodied athletes. And myself, as I stated earlier, also lost my temper, and Mr. Pistorius as well. The second occasion was when we were in London, prior to the London 2012 Olympic Games. Mr. Pistorius had an interview scheduled at the BBC, a radio interview, and we were in studio at the BBC studios in London, where Mr. Pistorius was questioned by a journalist, and the tone of the questions and everything was leading up to the eventual question that was put to Mr. Pistorius: don't he think that he's an embarrassment for his country for trying to compete in the Olympic Games? Whereupon myself also called Mr. Pistorius out of the studio, and both Mr. Pistorius and myself left the studio. Those were the two occasions that I can honestly say that he lost his temper and saw and showed his disappointment and anger with it.
Have you had occasion to meet Ms. Steenkamp?
I did meet Ms. Steenkamp.
Could you tell the court about that? How many occasions, for instance?
I can't recall the specific number of occasions, but I did meet Ms. Steenkamp on a number of occasions with Mr. Pistorius at different venues.
And seeing through your eyes, what was the relationship like?
For me, I would describe it as a loving and caring relationship. Mr. Pistorius and Ms. Steenkamp was always calling each other pet names as well.
Did he involve her in his career?
Yes, Mr. Pistorius and myself actually, and it was very interesting for me, had a meeting on the 7th of February in 2013 at his house, which was one of the things that we always did. Sat on his big dining room table, put out all the contracts, put out a calendar for the year to look at all the different competitions and scheduled events that we can do for the year, what was the main target for the year. And we were planning his season for 2013 with the highlight being the IAAF Athletic World Championships in Moscow. And usually what we then do is we work backwards from that, looking at specific dates of specific competitions that the coach would then want Oscar to compete in. Based on that, we then said, okay, we have a couple of competitions which at that stage, what we termed exhibition events. One was going to be in Brazil on the 31st of March, and the second on the 25th of May in Manchester. And Mr. Pistorius then specifically asked me if I wouldn't mind to ask the organizers if he can have Ms. Steenkamp accompany him on these two trips, which for me was a first. He's never asked me for anything like this, to have one of his girlfriends in the past accompanying on any trips to an athletics competition. I then put a question to Mr. Pistorius: why do you want this? And his reply to me was, I actually want Ms. Steenkamp to see what my world is about, the pressure that I'm under, how I need to perform, and also that she can understand better why I sometimes cannot go to specific events or functions with her, that I have to have enough sleep in order to train and perform at the levels I'm required to perform at. Also that there might be certain events that I cannot go to due to my own sponsor commitments, and then also obviously that I've got to stick to a strict diet. I cannot maybe sometimes go to eat at a specific restaurant with friends, go out late at night, and that was very interesting for me that he requested that.
You made available to me documents that I wanted to identify. My lady, I would Ask the court to accept it as exhibit triple V.
Thank you.
What is this document? Can you identify this document?
Yes, my lady, this was an email communication between myself and Mr. Andy Kane, who is the meeting director of the Manchester City Games.
And when was this communication?
This specific communication between myself and Mr. Andy Kane was on the evening of the 13th of February at 7:29 p.m.
Which year?
2013. So
And-
13th of February 2013, 7:29 p.m.
And what was this all about?
This was to finalize the terms and conditions upon which Mr. Pistorius would compete in this event in Manchester.
And how is this relevant to Ms. Steenkamp?
On the second page of the email, I specifically requested that the following terms that still need to be clarified for Mr. Pistorius in order to compete was that we also required and asked for an additional business class flight for Ms. Steenkamp to join Mr. Pistorius on this trip. I can also, if I may, ma'am, or my lady, just add that there was also already a contract in place for Mr. Pistorius to compete, as I mentioned earlier, on the 31st of March in Brazil, in Rio, where Mr. Pistorius was scheduled to compete against Mr. Alan Oliveira, the Brazilian chap that beat him at the Paralympic Games in London in the 200 meters. And this was going to be the first time that they were going head-to-head after the very famous race in London. And I have also secured for Ms. Steenkamp to join Mr. Pistorius on that trip, where there was also already agreed in the contract that flight tickets for 5 people to accompany Mr. Pistorius, which would consist of Mr. Pistorius himself, the coach, Mr. Ampilou, myself, our physiotherapist, Mr. Eben Verster, and then Ms. Steenkamp.
I put before you a document that you've also made available to me, that I would ask that will be identified and that you accept it as exhibit triple W. Can you look at this document and identify, inform the court what this is all about?
Yes, my lady, this is the email communication between myself and the meeting organizer of this specific event in Brazil.
And what does this confirm?
This basically just states and confirms that the terms and agreement of the contract was in place. I see that there's actually not the actual contract attached to this.
Yeah, we have the actual contract. If necessary, we can make it available.
All right, but yeah, it's my lady. Then yeah, in that contract was stipulated that Ms. Steenkamp then also would accompany Mr. Pistorius to this event.
Yeah, should it be an issue, the contract's available here. I just don't want to hand it all possible documents. Mr. Van Zyl, what was the position as regards the financial future, so to speak, of Mr. Pistorius during February 2013?
Due to the amazing performances of Mr. Pistorius in London at the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, his profile was raised to global icon, sports icon status. And I think all media would agree with me that the London Olympic Games was about 2 people, and that was Mr. Usain Bolt and Mr. Oscar Pistorius. Based on this and the profile that Mr. Pistorius's image carried in the business world, a lot of opportunities and a number of opportunities came our way where corporate companies wanted to be associated with Mr. Pistorius due to the synergy between their values and his values, and they would want to build marketing and advertising campaigns based on that.
And the financial implications, when would that have realized?
The financial implications was going to be substantial. I can easily say 5-6 times more than what it was before the London Olympic Games. During this meeting that we specifically had on the 7th of February, we also discussed the current contracts that was already put in place and that was going to be running until the end of 2017 when Mr. Pistorius would have announced his retirement from athletics. And then also some of the current sponsors we were still busy in negotiation with, where not only would Mr. Pistorius have brand ambassadorial roles until his retirement, but also post-retirement for the work and effort that is put in for these brands. Some of these contracts also not only would entail financial implications, but also share options for Mr. Pistorius in some of these companies, and also royalties that you would earn from sales of products and merchandise carrying his brand.
In February 2013, was he aware of all these contracts and opportunities and obviously the bright financial future waiting for him?
Yes, Mr. Pistorius was very aware of that. Mr. Pistorius, I can also confirm, is a very astute businessman, and he was very aware of the role that he had to play within his brand and the financial implications that he stood to gain in the years to come.
You spoke about Ms. Steenkamp and that it was the first time that he wanted a girlfriend of his to accompany him. The one that you did not refer to that you shared with me in consultation was Mr. Bocelli, Andre Bocelli.
Yes, apart from these two specific competitions that Mr. Pistorius wanted Ms. Reeva Steenkamp to accompany him with, was also another opportunity that presented itself, and we also discussed it on that specific day of the 7th of February, where I received from my travel agent an email on a weekly basis which they call travel notes, and it's Brooklyn Travel here in Pretoria. They've been my travel agent for all my athletes for over the past 10 years. And in this was a specific mention of an Andrea Bocelli concert that was going to be staged on the 13th of July in Tuscany in Italy. And I specifically said to Mr. Pistorius, well, if you want to take Ms. Steenkamp to these competitions, why don't you really impress her by taking her to an Andrea Bocelli concert? And he was very excited about it and asked me to look into it and try and find more information. But the relevance of this was, back in 2009, Mr. Pistorius did a music video for an Italian rock band called Negramaro, which we shot in October and November in the Arena, which is one of the famous Italian stadiums in Milan. And during our discussions with the gentleman from the music label called Sugar Music, which is a family-owned business, it was also mentioned to us that they also are the music label for Mr. Andrea Bocelli. So I said to Mr. Pistorius on this occasion during our meeting on the 7th that maybe it's time for us to call on this favor to see if we cannot get you 2 tickets for you and Ms. Steenkamp to go and watch this concert in Tuscany.
Now, these planned travel arrangements where Ms. Steenkamp would have accompanied him, did you discuss it with her?
Yes, I did. Mr. Pistorius was actually very excited, and he phoned on his iPhone on a video call actually, and he passed the phone on to me and said to Reeva that if I can please give her the good news, and I informed Ms. Steenkamp that she would be going with us to Brazil, and that I'm also working on a trip for her to go to Manchester with us together.
And how did she feel about it?
She was very excited and very ecstatic about the opportunity to travel with us to these different competitions.
Thank you, my lady. I have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wu. Yes, Mr.
My lady, I see it's 11:15.
Is it?
It's completed.
Yes, we'll take our adjournment.
As God pleases.
Yeah, I've got them. Thank you.
There wasn't that much. 1 minute, guys.
Just hold it. I'm telling you, it's because this building never lets any sun. I know.
Can we swap it to rounds quickly?